London is a dream destination for many people. It's a city that everyone knows from the movies before seeing it in person. Some people have walked through London without ever setting foot in the airport. If you're a Harry Potter fan, then you've already run through Platform 9 and 3/4 at King's Cross, strolled through Leadenhall Market, which became Diagon Alley, and even crossed Piccadilly Circus, Geelong with the main trio. If you're a fan of romance, you've already walked through Notting Hill, with its colorful houses and the bookstore where Julia Roberts meets Hugh. You could also say that you've crossed Tower Bridge with Bridget Jones, always in love, desperate, or both at the same time. And if you like action, there's the London of spy movies, the London where Tom Cruise runs across the rooftops in Mission Impossible, and where 007 turns the London Underground into a chase scene. This is the London that everyone knows, the London of movies, TV series, and postcards. But what if I told you that there is another city called London, right in the middle of this famous London? A real independent city that operates by its own rules, a city where not even the king himself can enter freely. A tiny territory that controls trillions of dollars every day. That's right. Today, Bello Mundo will take you to see this other London that doesn't appear in any guidebook. The secret London. The London within London itself. Today, it's not so rare to find one place inside another. Italy, for example, has two clear examples. Within the city of Rome lies the Vatican, the smallest country on the planet, with its colorful Swiss guards and everything an independent state is entitled to. And not far from there, still within Italian territory, is San Marino, that small country high in the mountains that many people only discover when they read their passport for the first time. When we broaden our view to the rest of Europe, similar situations arise. There are places that seem to be separate, but in practice are stuck to their neighbors. Liechtenstein is one of them. It is squeezed between Switzerland and Austria, so close to both that the borders are barely visible on the map. So much so that in 2007, a group of Swiss soldiers accidentally crossed the border during a night training exercise. They walked as if they were still at home and only realized their mistake the next day. Switzerland apologized, Liechtenstein responded calmly, and the story ended up becoming one of the region's best curiosities, precisely because it shows how close everything is there. And it is in this universe of places nested within others that we arrive at today's destination, a place called the City of London, within London, that almost no one knows about. To understand why there is a city hidden within another, we need to go back to a time when London did not even dream of being London. It all started when the Romans set foot on the island and saw the River Thames as the perfect route to control who entered and left the region. It was around the year 43 that they founded Londinium. There, on the banks of the river, they built a port, opened a road, set up a market, and after a few decades, surrounded everything with a huge wall. That wall not only defended the city, it also marked the boundary of what was the center of Roman life. Inside was the protected core. Outside, the world was still settling down. This organization lasted for centuries until the Roman Empire began to collapse. When Rome decided to withdraw its troops in the early 4th century, Londinium lost its protection and began to decline. It became a somewhat abandoned place, full of ruins, but with one detail that no one could ignore. The river was still there, connecting the interior to the sea and attracting trade all the time. Over time, people from Northern Europe began to occupy the region. Among them were Angles and Saxons, who preferred to avoid the ruins within the walls and created a new settlement in an open area, roughly where Covent Garden is located, a central London neighborhood with good restaurant options and some of the best pubs in the city. It is a very charming area with narrow cobbled streets, old red brick buildings alternating with modern buildings, full of clothing stores and coffee shops. But at the time it was a rural area. This nucleus was called Lundenwic and became the center of local life for several generations. However, England became the target of another group. From the 8th century onwards, the Vikings began to attack by river, burning cities and leaving Lundenwic vulnerable. The solution found was to return inside the old Roman wall. The Anglo-Saxons reinforced the defenses, rebuilt the interior space, and called this fortified version Lundenburg. Inside it was safer. Inside the city could breathe. From then on, London was truly reborn. Life returned to the walls, and the outer areas began to grow slowly. Centuries passed and houses began to spread beyond the old wall. Inside, the oldest, densest part of the city remained, more connected to commerce. Outside, neighborhoods, churches, and new streets grew. This expansion would eventually become Greater London. The original piece, surrounded by the Romans, became what we now call the City of London. By the 13th century, this area was no longer just a dot on the map. It had become one of the main commercial centers in Europe. Merchants, fairs, different currencies, contracts, everything circulated there. And the more useful and wealthy the city became, the more it gained something very special, the right to decide its own destiny. This is where the curious part of the story begins. With the City of London functioning as a place full of commerce and money circulating, those who lived there began to demand more than just security within a wall. They wanted to participate in decisions. It made no sense to be the economic center and continue to be treated like any other lost village. Throughout the Middle Ages, meetings began to take place between those in power and those who worked. First in open assemblies, then in more organized meetings. Merchants and artisans joined together in groups that became known as trade companies, the famous guilds of London. Each trade had its own association, and together these companies began to have a voice. The city also began to have its own councils and courts. Former meeting places became venues for discussing rules, taxes, and disputes. Gradually, the idea that London only obeyed orders from outside began to change. The city wanted to be treated as a separate entity within the kingdom. This movement gained momentum when kings began to depend even more on the money circulating within it. In exchange for support, loans, and stability, the city received formal privileges. Letters signed by the crown confirmed rights already in practice and guaranteed new ones. Among these documents, the most famous of all is the Magna Carta of 1215, which recognizes the ancient freedoms of the City of London. These freedoms were not symbolic. They meant, for example, being able to choose their own mayor, having their own courts, having specific rules, and not being treated like any other ordinary village in the kingdom. The city gained the right to elect its own leader, and over time this position became what we now know as Lord Mayor. While other English cities were stuck with more rigid models, the City of London already had a system in which residents and trade guilds participated in decisions, and this became stronger as the centuries passed. Each new king who ascended the throne reconfirmed the city's freedoms because he knew how big a problem it would be to go head-to-head with the place that moved much of the country's money. It is because of this sequence of agreements, privileges, and confirmations that, later on, the City of London consolidated itself as this almost independent piece tucked away in the middle of the capital, a place with its own government, its own rules, and a power structure unlike anywhere else in England. When you look at how the City of London is governed, it becomes clear why so many people say that this place exists in a universe of its own. Nothing here works like it does in the rest of the country. It seems like a mixture of medieval tradition and a political system that only makes sense to those born into it. The basis of everything lies in the old trade companies, those guilds that emerged long ago when merchants and craftsmen began to organize themselves. They still exist today, numbering more than 100, and some have names that seem to come straight out of an old book. Tallow candle makers, people who deal with animal horns, pavers. Other guilds are modern, such as those linked to communication and technology. Together, they form a powerful group called Common Hall, responsible for choosing important figures such as sheriffs and the Lord Mayor. In addition to the guilds, the city has two main institutions: the Court of Aldermen, which brings together 25 representatives, one for each district of the city, and the Court of the Common Council, which is the real decision-making center. This council has 100 members and functions as the equivalent of a city council. The difference is that here there is a rule that only the City of London maintains to this day. To be elected, a person must have the title of Free Citizen of the city, a right that dates back to 1237. And that's where the part that confuses everyone the most comes in: who votes and who doesn't. The City of London is the only place in the United Kingdom where companies have the right to vote in elections. This is not a metaphor, it is literal. Corporate voting was abolished in the rest of the country in 1969, but in the city it continued, gained strength, and was expanded by recent laws. Here's how it works. Every company with an office in the city can appoint voters. Small companies appoint one person. Companies with 50 employees appoint 10 people, and the more employees they have, the more votes they can appoint. These voters vote exactly as residents do. They choose councillors, choose representatives, and influence decisions. In practice, the number of votes cast by companies is greater than the number of votes cast by the people who actually live there. In 2024, there were more than 13,000 corporate voters, compared to about 6,500 residents. This explains why so many people criticize this system, since the city functions as a district. But most of the votes are cast by people who don't even live there. They just work there. The result is a government in which commercial interests carry enormous weight, and this is not exactly hidden. The City of London Corporation itself, which is what the government is called, makes it clear that its mission is to support the financial sector and defend the interests of the square mile. To top it off, there is the position of Lord Mayor, which has nothing to do with the Mayor of London, who governs the entire Greater London area. The Lord Mayor represents only the city and performs functions that combine ceremony, tradition, and diplomacy. He chairs meetings, represents the city before authorities, and maintains rituals that have been repeated for centuries. To hold this position, a person must have been one of the 2 city sheriffs in the previous year, which makes the process even more closed and traditional. This set of councils, guilds, corporate votes, and ancient titles creates a political structure unlike anything else in the United Kingdom. And that is what gives the city its autonomy and personality. But it does not attract attention just because it is small and old. In fact, this 1 square kilometer piece of land attracts attention because it is one of the most influential financial centers on the planet. It is where giant banks operate every day, where trillion-dollar funds move around, and where deals that affect entire countries are quietly closed. The curious thing is that almost all of this happens without the public noticing. The city has always had too much freedom, too many rights, and political weight that does not match its size. And this combination makes many people see the place as a territory that operates in the shadows. Much of this controversy stems from the city's connection to a network of regions that orbit the United Kingdom: the Cayman Islands, Jersey, Bermuda, the British Virgin Islands. places known worldwide for their extremely low taxes and very little transparency. The detail is that many of the business records on these islands are managed by offices located right inside the City of London. Experts call this a web, a structure that connects banks, funds, law firms, and shell companies in a flow of money that is difficult to trace. And when international bodies question this system, the answer is almost always the same. Everything is legal. Everything follows the rules, except that the city's rules are different from the rules anywhere else. Within the government structure, there is even a position created exclusively to protect the district's interests in the British Parliament. It is the Remembrancer, a figure who follows debates, analyzes bills, and ensures that nothing harms the square mile. No other city in the United Kingdom has anything like it. Only the City of London maintains this level of presence within the national government itself. With so many accumulated privileges, the city has become synonymous with economic power and also controversy. A place that moves money on a scale that is difficult to imagine, and that continues to operate with medieval traditions while the rest of the country has modernized. A territory that looks small on the map, but which pushes gigantic decisions for the whole world. And to understand the extent of this influence, nothing explains it better than the traditions it preserves. Rituals, positions, ceremonies, and symbols that have survived for centuries and still shape how the city sees itself today. An important part of its strength comes from the traditions it has carried for centuries, and these are not symbolic traditions. They are rituals that have helped shape the identity of the place and still dictate how power moves within it today. The best-known office is that of Lord Mayor, which has nothing to do with the Mayor of London who appears in the news. This one is something else. The Lord Mayor represents the City of London exclusively and holds a position that has existed since the Middle Ages. He is chosen every year by the guilds and inner circles of the city and takes on duties that combine diplomacy, ceremony, and a dash of spectacle. Before reaching this position, a person must have been one of the city's 2 sheriffs. The sheriffs are chosen in a traditional ceremony inside the Common Hall, complete with historical clothing, insignia, and rituals that have survived virtually intact since the 14th century. When their term ends, the path is open to run for the position of Lord Mayor. And if there's one thing the city takes seriously, it's ceremony. The most famous is the silent ceremony, when the Lord Mayor takes office. No one speaks, no one gives a speech, no one tries to be funny. It is an almost theatrical ritual, with only movements and gestures that have been repeated for centuries. The next day, the Lord Mayor's show takes place, a gigantic parade that takes to the streets and has existed since 1513. But no tradition arouses as much curiosity as the meeting between the monarch and the Lord Mayor at the city's border. This is where the story that the king cannot enter freely comes from. Many people believe that the monarch must ask permission to cross the border of the City of London. And this idea did not come out of nowhere. Whenever the monarch makes an official entry into the city, there is a specific ritual. A symbolic barrier is raised. The Lord Mayor approaches, carrying the city's sword, and presents its hilt to the sovereign. The king or queen touches the sword and returns it. This gesture is an ancient reminder of the agreements made between the city and the crown. It is not exactly a request for permission, but it is not just a decorative formality either. It is a performance that symbolizes who controls what. The city recognizes the authority of the monarch and at the same time reaffirms that it retains its own rights. It is this type of ceremony that fuels the aura of independence of the City of London. Everything there was designed to remind us that this tiny piece of land does not function like the rest of England. It has its own rights, its own offices, its own symbols, and the habit of preserving ancient traditions as if time had not passed. And these traditions are not isolated. They are part of a worldview sustained by the idea of freedom, autonomy, and historical privileges that the city defends tooth and nail. So, did you already know about this other London? Tell us in the comments what surprised you most about this video. If you liked the content, leave your like, share it, and of course, don't forget to activate Hypar's new feature. This helps the channel gain visibility and continue bringing you these unbelievable trips around our beautiful world. See you next time.